This feels nice. Welcome. As I like to every summer, I want to start with a bracha. My first bracha is that I hope you find this beit midrash here a safe beit midrash. It's a place where you feel safe to be exactly who you are. That's one of the key features of the Hartman Institute. We're not here to change you in a way that you don't want to be changed. You are in the driver's seat. And I hope you find this as a place where you both feel safe, you feel respected by both the faculty and you feel respected by your colleagues in the beit midrash. A beit midrash which is not founded on respect is not a Hartman beit midrash. And that reflects itself in the way you talk, in the way you listen, and in the way you learn. My second bracha is that this be a little unsafe, that it be challenging, that it push you, that it make you feel a little uncomfortable, that it be a place where you could grow. Know that in this beit midrash, we want you to grow, but we have no idea who you should grow into being. It's one of the strange things about Hartman. We want you to be more because everybody has to always be more. If you are who you ought to be, there's something wrong with your definition of who you ought to be. Everybody has to be more. But I don't have a clue who you should be. I can't have a clue because I don't know you. The way we teach is we want to challenge you to challenge yourselves. My third bracha, it is that it be a meaningful beit midrash. That it be a beit midrash where you get to ask and think about some of the most important questions facing your lives individually and facing the Jewish people collectively. In our beit midrash, it's a beit midrash literally with windows. Because what we study inside the beit midrash is shaped by what goes on outside of the beit midrash. And unlike Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who ran away to a cave, the purpose of our beit midrash is not to be a cave. It's not to be a place where we escape from life. It's meant to be a place where we engage life. That's the way we understand the idea, which the rabbis debated. What's greater? Is Torah greater or is action greater? What's more important? Should a person learn or should a person do? And the rabbis answer, great is learning, for it leads to action. But we know that's not true. Very often, learning could be escape away from action. I can live in my own ivory tower and not be bothered by their problems. Come to the Hartman Institute to forget about the tsaros of the Jews. Come delve into the world of Talmud because it's a world unto itself which is complex and interesting. That's not our beit midrash. Torah is great, not because by definition it leads to action, but Torah is great because it must lead to action. Because what we study is the study of the challenges facing our people. So let it be safe, let it be challenging, let it be meaningful. And inshallah, it might also be inspirational. But that is already something you can't plan. That might happen. Might happen at moments. Not everything is going to be inspirational, but sometimes there's those magical moments where the sum total is greater than the parts, and that your engagement with these questions be something that could inspire you to new heights. And so, welcome, and thank you for trusting us, and thank you for choosing this as a beit midrash that you want to be a part of. Our theme this year is Legacies of the Past and the Future of Modern Israel. I want to explain the title for a moment, because we could talk about the future challenges of modern Israel without the legacies of the past. But there will be two core flaws or challenges. The first is when we talk about the future, we immediately talk about the challenges. We talk about what we want, what's missing. And then Jewish life is perpetually this sort of dissatisfied kvetch. It's like, we can't even feel good. We never are able to feel good about anything, because to be a Jew is to be more, and I'm always want to be more. And when we start with the challenges of the future, there are so many challenges of the future, and there always will be challenges of the future. It's inevitable. But I want us to breathe for a moment. We are in the most remarkable moment in Jewish history. And it's only if we remember the legacies of the past that we're going to be able to recognize we are the most gifted Jews in history. We are a strong people, a powerful people, free people, have a homeland of the Jewish people. Who would have thunk? So when we talk about the challenges, let's start with a sense of shechayanu, a sense of thankfulness. Let's remember that it wasn't always so. Because sometimes Jewish life could be one perpetual shiva. I'm just mourning forever. Ugh, what could have been and what is not what was, and we're never going to be, and it won't be, and maybe it won't be tomorrow. And are your children going to be Jewish, and is Israel going to exist? And it's exhausting. And frankly, who would ever want to be a part of such a people? Like, if you think about it for a moment. So here it is, we want to embrace the challenges to create meaning, but we sometimes overdo it. We don't know how to celebrate. We're great at mourning. It's like we're really, really good at mourning. And part of what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at the future, but first, let's connect also to the legacies of this. This year is a remarkable year. It's the year of the sevens. It's 100 years since 1917, 70 years since 47, 50 years since 67. Each one of these moments are miracles that no Jew in Jewish history could have even experienced, and we had 3 in 1 century. 3. Each one of them was remarkable. Each one of them were things that people didn't even think was possible. Now, if we wanted to push it, we would have also told you about 1897, which is 120 years since Basel, but we felt it was starting to sound a little too kitschy. It gets creepy, there's too many sevens going on here, and then I'll give you a Kabbalistic lecture about 7 defines the totality of being, and now we're entering the 8th, but I don't do Kabbalah, so we didn't want to do that. But we're coming off one of the best 100 years. That's true. There were also, in a certain sense, some of the worst. But still, there's much to be thankful of. And let's remember what it is that we need to celebrate, what it is that we need to learn. And it's even deeper than that, because it is only out of a position of strength that we could think about our future. We're not turning to our future as broken people. We're not thinking about our future as a powerless people, barely capable of scraping together a living or an existence. Part of the Torah of this beit midrash, which is one of the greatest gifts of Israel, is that we get to think about our future with a position of confidence, strength, vitality. And it is precisely when you feel good about yourself that you could grow. It's precisely when you feel good about yourself, when you recognize that the cup is not only is half full, that there's a potential not only to see the half full, you could actually fill in the other half. But if the cup is always half empty, you give up because no matter what you do, it'll always be half empty. There's a lot of confidence which we've earned and which Israel has earned, which gives us great opportunities. Legacies of the past first. But there's also another reason. And that is that who we are is a result of these 100 years. These moments of celebration are also moments that shaped who we are today. You can't understand the realities of modern Jewish life unless you look at 1747, 67. Each one of these has redefined what it means to be a Jew, redefined what Israel is about, redefined what Jewish identity is about. So if you want to think about the future, if you want to understand who we are, then we have to go on a journey together. We have to go on a journey, not an archaeological journey to discover bones and to talk about dead Jews, but an ideological journey into the depths of the essence of the Jewish story as defined by the 20th century engagement with the state of Israel. And that's what we're going to do over the next week. We're going to celebrate who we are. We're going to celebrate the gifts that we've received. And out of confidence, we're going to ask, okay, what more do we want? But not as a sense of being kvetchy. It's what more do I want? Because to ask what is more is the essence of what it means to be a Jew. But it's also to delve deeply into what has shaped us. What made us who we are? And so let's begin that journey together. Let's begin the journey with a remarkable statement in 1917 by the Foreign Secretary of Britain, who declares, and don't worry, you don't need your text, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. 2,000 years of yearning to come home, but where at best it could be a prayer. At best we could only yearn for, we're praying to the only force that could possibly change our reality. Because it wasn't in our hands, and there's no one in the world who would help us. The only one who's going to help us is going to be God. It's in your hands, God. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, please. And all of a sudden, that dream, that aspiration, the Zionist movement, which started to push this in the 19th century, all of a sudden, the superpower of history, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. What happened? How did this idea of a national home for the Jewish people redefine the way every single one in this room understands what it means to be a Jew? To do that, we have to go back a little more than 100 years. We actually have to go back about 3,000. Very briefly. So come with me. It's okay, let's go 3,000. Let's go back to Genesis 12, and for those of you who've studied with me in the past, we're just going to, you're familiar with this, but a little reminder doesn't hurt. And for those of you who are new, welcome to an idea. From the moment that God says to Abraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha mimoladetcha mibet avicha el ha'aretz asher har'eka. From the moment God says to Abraham, go forth from your father's land, from the house that you were born, to the land that I will show you, Judaism is a balance between two core central ideas. As many of you know, it is the Judaism of being and the Judaism of becoming. There are two core ideas that shape what it means to be a Jew. The first is that Judaism, as a Judaism, is simply who you are. It's not what you do. It's not what you believe. To be a Jew is simply to be a part of a people. And an essential part of Judaism as a religion, very different from Christianity, very different from Islam, is that there is a sense of Jewish identity that has nothing to do with doing Jewish. As God says to Abraham in Genesis 12, thank you very much for being willing to kill your son. It made me feel much better. Our God is sometimes a little challenging. I really wanted to know if you love me. And what I really wanted to know is if you were going to be willing to give me the thing that's most important to you. And Abraham being willing to kill his son makes God's day. And consequently, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I swear, the Lord declares, because you have done this and not withheld your son, your favored one, because you were willing to sacrifice everything that was important to you. And we're going to leave aside the value of this. That's for a theological conference of another nature. Because you were willing to do this, I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore, and your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants, because you have obeyed my command. Abraham, being willing to walk alone and to go to the land that God chose. Abraham, being willing to live a life without a child and still not walk away from God. A God who constantly promises but doesn't fulfill. And Abraham's spirit was not going to be broken. And Abraham that was willing to finally give his son, his only son, the one that he was waiting his whole life for, and to say to God, you are more important to me than anything else. That Abraham, God says, do you know what? I will create from you a people. And the only thing that people have to do is to be born. That's it. The test is over. They don't have an Akedah. They don't have to listen. They are guaranteed to be the chosen people simply by virtue of the fact that you listened to me. And with Abraham, we are introduced to the Judaism of being. You get to be chosen simply because you are part of a family or married into that family. That's all what Jewishness means. And it's a core defining principle of Jewishness. To be Jewish is to be a part of a people. But at the same time, to be Jewish is not simply to be part of a people. To be Jewish is not simply who you are. To be Jewish is also a commitment to try to become something. Under the Judaism of becoming, first introduced in Exodus chapter 19, you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Abraham was great, but frankly, I want stuff from you too. To be Jewish is not simply who you are, it's to take upon yourself a responsibility to become something great, to become something worthy, to become a unique and exemplary people. One of the interesting features of Judaism is that Judaism has always been, or primarily from the destruction of the Second Temple, an amalgamation of the Judaism of being with the Judaism of becoming. You are Jewish. And to be Jewish means to feel commanded to become something more. The two, however, don't become one. They are two parallel dimensions of what it means to feel and to experience Jewish life. You don't become more or less Jewish if you keep Shabbos or you don't keep Shabbos. Under the Judaism of being, you simply are. And at the same time, just being doesn't define sufficiently what it is that we're supposed to be doing as Jews. When you hold the two, Judaism is strong. Judaism is powerful, and Judaism could survive some of the most difficult challenges which any people faced in history. We come, however, to the 19th century. And in the 19th century, Jews begin an experiment which in many ways was unprecedented in the first 3,000 years, close to 3,000 years of Jewish identity. In the 19th century, with emancipation and enlightenment, Jews try the experiment of being Jews of becoming without being Jews of being. We try to give up the notion that to be Jewish is to belong to a people. We want to explore whether Judaism could be like Christianity, a religion without a defined national identity. Why? Because the first time we're welcomed. For the first time, France, Napoleon turns to the Jews and says, "Come, be a Frenchman. Leave. You could be one of us. Your being doesn't have to be Jewish. Your being could be French. Your being could be German, Hungarian. Later on, at the end of the century, your being could be Russian. Your being could be English. We'll accept you as long as you give up your being." And Jews say, okay, maybe I'll try that. Maybe Judaism doesn't need a being. Maybe Judaism is just a system of commandments and values and virtues that a person should commit themselves to, all the while that they have a different collective identity. Not only are we welcomed, but the spirit of enlightenment descends on the world, in which universal truths and universal goods begins to create a notion of a universal community of humankind. Not only are we accepted as Frenchmen, we also are accepted as people. And the Russian Jewish author, writer, coins the famous saying, we are going to be a human being, a man, a human being in public, and a Jew in private. We're welcome to a new story. These two ideas, these two forces, enlightenment and emancipation, challenged us very, very deeply. And the Jews responded. Jews said, "Thank you. I am willing to be a Frenchman of Jewish persuasion." In a fascinating statement in the Pittsburgh platform of the Reform movement of 1885, it says as follows. "We recognize in the modern era of universal culture, enlightenment, universal culture of heart and intellect, the approaching of the realization of Israel's great messianic hope for the establishment of the kingdom of truth, justice, and peace amongst all men. We don't need countries. We don't need particular private identities. The messianic era is when we will all be united under the Torah of enlightenment. And in the spirit of the time, the Reform movement declares, we consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore expect neither a return to Palestine, nor of various sacrificial worship, etc., nor the restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state. We're just going to give it up. We're going to give up on the Judaism of being. But as Jews engaged in this embracing of both emancipation and enlightenment, another fascinating thing happened, which even further moved us away and disconnected us from peoplehood. How to respond to enlightenment created a profound debate in the Jewish people. Do we respond to enlightenment by changing Judaism, or do we respond to enlightenment by rejecting enlightenment? What does it mean to be committed to Torah? As you saw on the Pittsburgh platform, there is a new Torah. Torah has to adapt to the changes of reality, or does reality have to adapt to our commitment to Torah? And it gives birth to two denominations, Reform and Orthodoxy. Conservative movement hadn't yet come into being in the 19th century. One says we have to create a Judaism which hears the advancements of our time. And the other one says the essence of being a committed Jew is to be committed to Torah, is to do what Torah demands of you, and not to adapt it to what you want from Torah. It's about becoming what Torah demands, not for Torah to become what you demand. That's the essential ideology of ultra-Orthodoxy. While the Reform movement said Jews are changing. If we hold that position, Jews are going to leave. Let's create an internal dialogue. And in the 19th century, the Jewish people become or enter into a deep sectarian moment when denominationalism begins to define us. And I want to read you a statement from the Khatam Sofer for a moment. The Khatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Schreiber, the founder of ultra-Orthodoxy and the leader of this Orthodox movement in Germany and Hungary at the time, sees Reformed Jews and says as follows: if their fate, the fate of Reformed Jews, was in our hands, I would be of the opinion to separate them from our midst, to desist from giving our daughters to their sons and their sons to our daughters, so as to prevent our being drawn after them. Let their community be like that of the sectarians of the past, they living their lives and we ours. When in the midst of the Jewish people, there's a they and an ours, we are no longer an us. When they should go their way and we have to protect ourselves from them, we're no longer Jews of being. Enlightenment, emancipation, caused Jews to feel that peoplehood was a burden that they no longer wanted to carry. We want to now enter into a new universe of being citizens in Europe, citizens of the enlightened universal humankind. And therefore we give up peoplehood. The debates amongst the Jews was a stake into the heart of peoplehood, because we no longer see ourselves as part of a people. You have a different version of who we should become, and I have a different version of who should we become, and our debates about Torah, about who we should become, ensure or create a foundation in which we're no longer one people. And so as you exit the end of the 19th century, we are a people profoundly wounded from a historical perspective, but celebrating the newfound reality. We are no longer Jews of being and becoming. We are more accurately Jews of becoming alone. And Judaism, as we know it, would have been changed forever. But then we had a gift that saved us from ourselves. A gift which for most of Jewish history is a gift which keeps on giving. And that is anti-Semitism. You thought that you're Frenchman of Jewish persuasion. You thought that you're a person of the world. And they looked and said, you're a Jew. You're just simply a Jew. And no matter how much you try, you're not one of us. No matter no matter what you eat, and no matter what you dress, and I don't care how sophisticated your language is, you're a Jew. And anti-Semitism at its core, and it's interesting, even though it has profound religious foundations, ultimately attacks Jews for their peoplehood, attacks Jews in their being. You are a Jew. And 19th century Jews who were celebrating the new possibilities got slapped in the face by reality, which said, you will never be a part of us. You will never be welcomed in Christian Europe as equal citizens, ever. This is what in essence gives birth to the Zionist movement. Zionism, even though it had multiple dimensions to it, thinking about what does it mean to live in a Zionism of being and a Zionism of becoming, at its core, Zionism becomes successful because the fantasy of giving up our peoplehood was shattered by anti-Semitism. And Zionism says if we're never going to be safe in Christian Europe, the only solution, and this is Herzl, the only solution for the Jewish problem is for us to leave Christian Europe and to create a state where Jews could be safe. That is the core impetus of the Zionist movement. And now we go back to Balfour. Because Balfour himself, the declaration is built on a profound sense of anti-Semitism. Because when Balfour declares His Majesty's views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, he is basically declaring that you are not citizens in England. That I could actually look at an English Jew and say, your national home is there. You are a foreigner here. And what's so interesting is that let me get his name for a second. It's just beautiful. He has a strange name. I have difficulty remembering it. A member of the British cabinet, a Jew, Edwin Montagu, was unbelievably upset. And he writes a letter demanding and accusing the British government and the Balfour Declaration as being an anti-Semitic document. And he's right. And he says, Zionism has always seemed to me to be a mischievous political creed, untenable by any patriotic citizen of the United Kingdom. I'm an Englishman. What are you telling me to go build my national homeland? I'm here. But Christian Europe, which didn't accept the Jews, understood that we have to create a homeland for the Jewish people. Zionist ideology, together with Christian anti-Semitism, meet at the perfect moment and create a solution, which is called the homeland of the Jewish people. But what the Zionist movement, in essence, does is, whether it wanted to or did so willingly or was forced by anti-Semitism, brings back into Jewish conversation the idea that to be a Jew is to be a Jew. That to be a Jew is to be a part of a people. And that's why we need a homeland for the Jewish people. An idea that was on the verge of extinction in the 19th century. Zionism saves us from one of the greatest assimilations. Not an assimilation in which we rejected Torah, but an assimilation in which we had rejected the idea that to be Jewish is to be a part of a people. And Zionism brings back the idea of peoplehood and begins what in many ways is the 20th century, which could be defined as the century of Jewish peoplehood, and everyone in this room is a part of that story. Everyone in this room, a defining feature of who they are is, I'm part of the Jewish people. I'm proud to be part of the Jewish people. That's the gift of Zionism. Zionism saves Judaism from becoming a Protestant religion. and reminds us that we are an amalgamation, a complex amalgamation of being both a part of a people, of being, and also as a people being challenged to become. But what does a homeland of the Jewish people mean? What does it mean to build in Israel and to reclaim within this space this national identity? In its ideal form, it would have created a new amalgamation between being and becoming. It would have said, you're not just a denomination. You're not just an Orthodox Jew or Reformed Jew, you're a Jew. To be a Jew is a noun, not an adjective. It's who you are. And now let's ask, okay, this is who you are, now who do you want to become? But one of the great challenges of the Zionist movement is that while it brought back the idea of Jewish peoplehood, at the same time, it created a new imbalance, an imbalance that we are suffering from and being challenged by to this very day, both in Israel and outside of Israel. Because Zionism didn't just posit the idea that we also are a people. In the idea of a homeland of the Jewish people, we created the notion of a new imbalance. Maybe we could be Jews of being without being Jews of becoming. Maybe we could just be a people and let's leave Torah outside. Maybe we don't need that story. Maybe in Israel we could create a place where Jews could be so normal that we don't need Torah. That we're just like the French. It's actually an interesting version of the assimilation of Enlightenment. Enlightenment says be a human being outside and a Jew in your home. Zionism posits the possibility that you don't even have to be a Jew in your home anymore. You don't need that. Now you're just going to be an Israeli, both in the public and the private, and because this public space, which is all yours, there could be a sense of Jewish identity that doesn't need Torah, that doesn't need ritual, doesn't need to discuss and engage itself with a 3,000-year-old tradition. We're a nation like every other nation, and the fantasy of Zionism to create normalcy here is built on creating a new imbalance in which peoplehood takes precedence over Torah. If in the Pittsburgh platform they say, we do no longer consider the Jewish people ourselves a people, Zionism creates the possibility and the coherency of saying, we no longer consider ourselves a religion. I'm just a nation like all other nations. And as Berdyshevsky says, the famous Jewish Zionist writer, Jewish scholarship and religion are not the basic values. Every man may be as much or as little devoted to them as he wills. But the people of Israel comes before them. Israel precedes Torah. Instead of the two talking, it's true that Israel precedes Torah. But because it precedes it, it doesn't mean it stops there. But Zionism creates the possibility of it being able to stop there. Achad Ha'am, the secular rabbi of Zionism, says, we have a big problem because it's possible that in the end, Jewish state will be a state of German or Frenchmen of the Jewish race. A homeland of the Jewish people is not a Jewish state. It's the state of the Jews. And in Israel, it's coherent for Am Yisrael Chai to replace Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad as the defining creed of the Jewish people. It's coherent, and it actually was deeply embedded in the early Zionist story. And one of the reasons for that was simply reality. The dangers that we faced, the need to save Jews, to start attracting Jews from all over the world. Leave your Judaism aside. We need to save this people. the dangers that we faced, ultimately in the Holocaust itself, created a moment where I don't know about the Judaism of becoming. Let's just deal with Jewish survival, and tomorrow we'll deal with everything else. And this today lasted for decades, possibly even to this very day. A discussion about the Judaism of becoming is a luxury that the formation of the state cannot deal with right now. We just have to make sure, do I have a home for you? When you come here, how do we deal with a local population which sees us as stealing their homes? Which fights us. We're fighting them. We're in the midst of conflict from the moment we came here. By the 20s already, there's a conflict between the Jews who see this as the homeland of the Jewish people and the Arabs of Palestine, who, even though they don't see themselves yet as a national entity, see people coming and taking their space, and see Jews as just one more stage of European colonization. You're not coming home, you're now in my home. And the constant dangers that we faced from the moment that we arrived created within Zionism an ideology and a reality which just dealt with how do we make this a safe place? How do we make homeland for the people viable? And with this story, we're now ready to think about some of the challenges. We're now ready to think about what are some of the inner DNA of Zionism that creates a challenge for Jews in 217. The inner DNA of Zionism is the Judaism of being. That's its inner DNA. It's to deal with a homeland, it's Jewish people. That's what this place is about. It's Jewish people, it's about Jewish survival, it's about finally having a place where we could be safe. Enough. I want to be safe. It's not such a bad, I don't need great philosophy, and I don't want a pogrom. And if there is a pogrom, I want to know that I could defend myself. That's very, very normal. And that's in many ways, that was the dayenu of Zionism. And the truth is, it's a dayenu. It's like it's dayenu. It's enough. But one of the things that happened, because we emphasized either as a result of our deep secular Zionist Jewish instinct, and where many of the Jews came out of a deep Enlightenment consciousness, or whether it was simply the realities and the pressures of building a state, we did not create an amalgamation of being and becoming within this homeland of the Jewish people. We didn't develop a Torah of becoming for the homeland of the Jewish people. We didn't develop, what does it mean to have a homeland of the Jewish people? Is it just where Jews are going to be? But what about the Judaism that Jews come with? What about the Judaism of becoming? Does it change in the homeland of the Jewish people? How do we do Jewish in this homeland? I know how to do Jewish in Europe. I know how to do Jewish in my home. But how does having your own state redefine what doing Jewish should look like? What does Jewish look like in the public sphere? How do we live with Jews who disagree with us? How do we share a public space together? Those are issues only if you're looking to create a combination or a synthesis between the Judaism of being and the Judaism of becoming. But if all you're thinking about is the Judaism of being, and you leave aside the Judaism of becoming either forever or for another day, then you don't develop a Torah, and a vacuum is formed. And the state of Israel is a state which works very clearly to be the homeland of the Jews. And we create a policy in which any Jew, anyone whom anyone would kill for being a Jew, has automatic citizenship here. If your mother's Jewish, or your father's Jewish, or you're married to a Jew, or you have one Jewish grandparent, doesn't matter. You get to come home in the Judaism of being. Come home. What are we going to do with you, though, here? What happens if you're not just a Judaism? What happens if you want to do Jewish? How do you do Jewish in the public sphere? The Zionist movement created a vacuum. And like all vacuums, they never stay empty. Since we didn't develop a national Torah for who we ought to be, not just for being, but who we ought to be and become, we never developed it. The Zionist movement didn't engage in it, didn't think about it. We left it aside. Someone else who had a Torah came in. If you don't have a Torah, someone said, I have a Torah. I have a Torah. And it was very natural for the Zionists to say, okay, you have a Torah, take it. Because frankly, I don't care. Knock yourself out. What do you want? I'm a Jew of being. You care a lot about this? No problem. It then becomes also an ideal coalition compromise. Because what I want is an economic policy, what I want is a foreign policy, what I want is a defense policy. You care about Shabbos and buses, gesundheit. You're really so excited about who's going to put the cup before the person says, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamining, knock yourself out. Go for it. You be the one who puts the cup. You'll be the one who runs the chuppah, because frankly, it's just of no interest to me. I'm a Jew of being. We created this vacuum was created, and this vacuum is then filled by individuals who didn't coerce anybody. There was no coercion, is it malevolent intent? They just, you gave it. You gave it to me. You said, you be the official Jews of the country. You take care of becoming, and I got being. And that's a perfect compromise. And to this day, we don't have a Torah of the Judaism of Israel. To this day, we don't have a national Torah of what it means to be Jews in our own homeland. We have a Torah that this is homeland for Jews. But where does Judaism come into play here? Where does it come into play? Where should it not come into play? What are the tensions? How do we deal with differences? How do we deal with a public space that the Jews are going to want to bring their Judaism to? We never developed it to this very day. And we took the millet system of the Turks, and we took mythic status quos, and we just put together and created something which is just incoherent, to be left for a future day when we'll have the luxury of dealing with these issues. And in 217, not only do we have the luxury, we have an existential need. But it gets even more complicated. And I want to introduce you to a notion called mamlachtiyut, a term that has no translation in English. I define it as the consciousness of statehoodness. It's catchy. There's something about it. I could see it as a jingle, right? The consciousness of statehoodness. In the homeland of the Jewish people, we declare Israel is the homeland of all Jews. We have to recognize that in the Judaism of being, we have to create a space for all Jews. National consciousness, this state of consciousness of statehoodness, we employed when we built an army. We employed when we created economic policies. We asked, how do we create a state? But the individuals who were responsible for issues of state and religion did not only enter into a vacuum. When they filled up their vacuum, they filled it as a reflection of their own tribal, sectarian, denominational understandings. Since we didn't develop a Torah, they brought their Torah, but it's not just theirs. Their Torah is in many ways a deeply diasporic Torah, because it's a Torah which reflects the type of Jew you want to be, and not necessarily a Torah which asks, how do we do Judaism together? I, as an Orthodox Jew, or if, by the way, and if it was we left it to conservative reform, it would have been the same. We weren't trained in 2,000 years to think as a collective. We were trained to think as denominations. We were trained to do the Judaism of becoming however we wanted. So this void is filled, this vacuum is filled, but it's filled with something that in a very deep way undermines the whole national identity, undermines the idea of a homeland for the Jewish people. And here we come to one of the great paradoxes of Zionism. It's precisely because we didn't develop a Torah of the Judaism of becoming in our state that we are ultimately undermining the idea of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people. Because to be a homeland of the Jewish people is to be a place that accepts all Jews. And that means not just to accept them in Ben Gurion Airport, it's also to accept them at the Kotel. You got to have a place at the Kotel too. A place that you say, oh, I want to be there. That's where I would want to be. To accept, to be a homeland of the Jewish people means that all Jews with their rabbis have to be able to marry the way they want to marry, to convert the way they want to convert, to define kashrut the way they want to define kashrut. But because we didn't develop a Torah, not only did we create a void, Zionism ultimately creates a reality which undermines itself. Because if Jews aren't just a people, but there are Orthodox Jews and conservative Jews and secular Jews and Masorati Jews and Reconstructionist Jews and ultra-Orthodox Jews, the homeland of the Jewish people is going to be a homeland where Jews bring their Jewish baggage. And if you can't create a space for it, it's not just the Judaism of becoming that you're threatening. It's the Judaism of being in the context of Israel that you're threatening. Because Israel is a place that will defend you and respect you in the midst of war and in the midst of terror attacks. But could I defend you and love you and respect you in times of peace or in times of strength or in times of security? The lack of this Torah, the lack of a Zionist Torah of becoming, saved us on the one hand from the 19th century, but at the same time created a brand new challenge. And in many ways, when we celebrate today, 1917, in 217 we see the consequence of that Dayenu. Because one of the interesting things about the Song of Dayenu is that it's not true. Because if it was true, Dayenu would be one line. Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim hotzianu mi lo yatzanu hem shefatim dayenu. Enough. And then the Seder would be shorter. We'd get to the food quicker. Life would be fine. 25 lines of Dayenu leads the famous Hasidic rabbi to say that it's Dayenu. Of course, this is our question mark. It's not Dayenu, it's Dayenu. That's why we keep on saying. But that Dayenu created a problem that is in essence the defining challenge of Israel today, or one of them. But it also created one additional challenge, and with that I'll conclude. It not only created an internal challenge in Israel, it also, 1917, sows the seeds of, on the one hand, the embracing of Zionism by world Jewry, and at the same time, the seeds of a potential divorce between world Jewry and the state of Israel. On the one hand, by declaring itself the homeland of the Jewish people, it becomes something that all Jews could be connected to, all Jews could celebrate. Because if I was in England or I was in America or wherever I was, if I was in danger, it became a place that I could join. If I was safe, it became something that I could care about because I'm responsible for Jews. And you compare, it's so fascinating. If you compare the Pittsburgh platform of 1885 of the Reform movement with the Columbus platform of the Reform movement of 1937, it just shows you how precisely the Zionism of the Judaism of being becomes a unifying force. By 1937, world Jewry has reconnected to peoplehood. World Jewry has reclaimed its place of seeing itself as a people and consequently unites all Jews, ultimately leading, as you know, federation and support of Israel. You don't just donate to federation, you belong to federation. The whole birthright move is, birthright is not a trip which involves an investment in the Judaism of becoming. It's to try to create Jews of being. That's its curriculum. And it was founded and funded by people who are primarily Jews of being. We are part of a people. And 20 years after Balfour, the same movement which said, we no longer see ourselves as a people, now Judaism is the soul of which Israel is the body. All of a sudden, we have a body. Living in all parts of the world, Israel has been held together by the ties of common history. Where's religion? We have a history. We're a people. Now, there's a dance, and the Reform movement works very, very hard to create a Judaism of being and a Judaism of becoming, and it's beautifully expressed in this platform. But what's remarkable is that in 1885, we gave up, or the Reform movement gave up on this people. Now it's a dance between the two. And now in all lands where our people live, they assume and seek to share loyally in the full duties and responsibilities of citizenship and to create seats of Jewish knowledge and religion. But in the rehabilitation of Palestine, the land hallowed by memories and hopes, we behold the promise of renewed life for many of our brethren. We affirm the obligation of all Jewry to aid in the upbuilding of as a Jewish homeland. Literally quoting Balfour. Jews around the world get connected to this national project. But at the same time, one of the things that we have to understand is that one of the defining features of North American Jewish life today is that for some, in particular of a generational persuasion, there is a move back to 19th century Judaism. America and Canada are turning out to possibly be the only places in the world where you could be a Jew, a Frenchman of Jewish persuasion. I could be an American or Canadian of Jewish persuasion. The Enlightenment project, the Emancipation project that didn't work in Europe is working today in North America. 60s, the moves after Six-Day War, and we'll talk about it, the 70s, 80s, 90s, the 21st century, we are Americans and Canadians. And we might support Israel, but we are first and foremost, or increasingly becoming, Jews of becoming. And the Judaism of being is not meaningful, not always sensible, and very often not necessary. Not only does an absence of the Torah of becoming for Israel create a void which undermines the peoplehoodness of Israel, undermines the possibility of world Jewry to support Israel if they don't feel that their Judaism of becoming is respected here. But what happens if Israel remains predominantly a Israel of being, while world Jewry becomes ever more Jews of becoming? Instead of the secret of Jewish survival being the amalgamation of the two, we now have two communities who, instead of correcting each other and creating a new whole, instead of each one of us learning from the other and completing each other in a new way, in many ways, the way in which many Jews in their 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. experience, what happens when we have two opposite notions? The only thing that could possibly save us is the gift that keeps on giving. But if, as we look at the legacies of the past and the challenges for the future, if our future is built on a prayer, not next year in Jerusalem, but next year may anti-Semitism get stronger and stronger. If that's the secret to Jewish peoplehood, if that's the only way that the Jews are actually going to get together, if that's the only way that we're going to create a new balance, then maybe the price is too high. And maybe it's unnecessary. And so as we celebrate 1917, as we see the fact that we are a people, a free people in our homeland, as a gift to our Jewishness and a gift to our identity that no Jew prior to our century, they imagined it, but they couldn't expect it. As we celebrate that gift, I love living in Israel. I love the gift of being a citizen, a free citizen in my own country. We now have to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that this gift takes upon itself the challenges of building the Torah that this gift truly requires? I have no complaints about anybody in the past. For the first 100 years, we were really busy. The truth is, we're still busy. We're still not safe. We're still not safe. But now, we're strong enough. We're strong enough to be careful. We're strong enough to protect ourselves. But I hope we're also strong enough to begin to look at the gift of 1917 and say, how do we complete the story? How do we create a homeland for the Jewish people, which does not only have a Torah of being, but also has a new sovereign national consciousness Torah of becoming, a place where all Jews, where the homeland of the Jewish people could be a place where not only Jews are safe, but like this beit midrash, where their Torah is safe, where their Judaism is respected, and where they challenge themselves to become ever more. When we do that, then the celebration of 1917 will be complete, and the legacies of the past will be a bracha for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we have some time for questions. Now, yes, please, ma'am. And I will repeat the questions. Yes, please.
It was not clear for me to what do you refer to when you say the Torah of the new state of Israel. If you allude to the interpretation of the rabbi, they're still interpreting of all in all the branches. The living covenant, right? The Hartman is a sign of the new thinking that is
Oh, the question is, your name, please? Ruth. Ruth is asking, what do you mean by the Torah of the Torah of Israel? There's a lot of work. What does it mean? What does it mean exactly? Yes, my friend, there's a tremendous amount of work. And the truth is, we don't really know yet. What does it mean to be, what does a Jewish democratic state mean? What does a Jewish public sphere mean in which Jews disagree about Judaism? What does it mean to build a homeland for the Jewish people at a time where Judaism doesn't unite us, it divides us? One of the things that we have come to learn is that Israel will not be a place which is neutral to Judaism. You're not going to create a separation of church and state here in the Jewish state. The homeland of the Jewish people is going to be a place where Judaism comes in. Now the question is, whose Judaism? Is it only going to be one denomination's Judaism? Is it only going to be those who say, I care about this, and you don't care? Or, I'll just give you a simple example, one that I've shared with some of you over the years. In the state of Israel, the country allots between 10 to 16 hours a week for students to study Judaism in Orthodox day schools. And it does so because Orthodox Jews say, I have a Torah of becoming, and I want to educate my children to it. And so the state says, okay. And they say, I can't be in a school that doesn't teach what I care about. And so 10 to 16 hours at minimum. 10 to 16 hours at minimum. And in Haredi schools, it's 40 hours a week, are about their Torah. But secular and traditional Jews never got up and said to the country, I have a Torah of becoming also, and I want to teach it to my children, and I need hours. And so the country doesn't give you hours. Bible, we love that one. Yes, it's the Bible, it's Sefer HaSfarim, it's the book of all books. But we don't study it as a system of values and Torah. It's archaeology, it's a completely other tradition. Because they didn't develop that Torah. Each one of us, what's the Torah that we want to teach our children? What's the Torah of how we live together? The army today is being split apart. Split apart. What does it mean to be a Jewish army? How are we supposed to respond in the midst of terror attacks? How does a Jewish soldier conduct themselves? The army with its code of ethics says, I have a Torah. And the country says, I don't know if that's a Torah. And we're not together anymore. We know how to build Startup Nation. We know how to build roads. We know how to build buildings. We know how to create a vibrant economy. We know how to defend ourselves. Those are, by the way, I'm not belittling them. Those are great things. And I want to tell you, thank God. I don't belittle that at all. Every single day of my life, I get up and I say, thank God for that. Okay, and now what? What does it mean? I'm not here to offer an answer. I have some answers, but it's incomplete unless we engage in it together. We need a new national conversation. Look at the conversation at the Kotel. Where is there in Israel a serious number of Israeli Jews who are fighting for the third section of the Kotel called Ezrat Am Yisrael, Ezrat Yisrael? Where are they? Forget the fact that Reform or conservative Jews who come at certain times are all we're going to have a minyan there. Where are the Israelis in that minyan? Where are the legions of Israelis who say, I have a Torah of becoming. I want to have this type of bar mitzvah for my children. Where are they? They're not there. And therefore they say, okay, you know what? If for the coalition, no problem. I'm inviting you to think about a question. And that's also part of this beit midrash. Part of this beit midrash is sometimes to offer you different answers. But when I said part of it is also to challenge you, is to say this, for the next 20 years, has to be one of the central intellectual agendas of the Jewish people. And we're going to have to try, we're going to have to develop, we're going to have to think. How do we live together? What are our marriages? What's our public sphere about? How do we join together? How do we even function in the same army unit together? You want women to sing? I don't want women to sing. You want women in the army? I don't want women in the unit. I want to treat a terrorist this way. You want to treat a terrorist this way. What does it mean? We didn't come here. Now in 217, we have the luxury to say, it's not dayenu just to be. We want to become. That demands a Torah. And that demands a lot of work from all of us. And I'm positing that we need to begin that challenge. That it's difficult. Welcome to 2017. Let me just see if I see your hand, and then I see your hand and yours, and then that's there. Then we're going to move over to you. Could you do me a kindness and remember? Because I just won't remember you. Then I said your hand in the back, and then your hand right here, and your hand and your hand. We're good. We got a whole balance going on here. It's excellent. We have age, we got the whole story. Good. I have no idea who I pointed to. Please, sir.
How do you relate the ideas that you wrote about in the book, Putting God Second, to the ideas that we're talking about tonight in Torah and Israel and the Jewish people?
First, thank you for that question. I don't know if you heard the question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to control my self-interest at this moment and say it's a different book. It's a new book that I'm writing, but it's not. Oh, what's the question? The question was, Donniel, I read your book, the Putting God Second, and I loved it. What's the matter? And it moved me. It was very, very meaningful and important in my life. And therefore, I feel it must provide some form of an outline for how we have to continue today. Again, some of the Torah of Israel that motivates me is a Torah in which God is put second and moral responsibilities are put first. But that's not part of the story. That's mine. We have to talk together. There's another book that I'm writing, that I'm in the midst of writing now. I just am missing 4 hours a day. If anybody could find for me 4 hours a day, I've lost them, and I just need to find them. It's on Who Are the Jews, and an essential part of it is also talking about these questions. But we all have to start talking. Orthodox, conservative, reform, reconstructionist, renewal, traditional, religious, secular. And I don't know if my book is helpful. It aggravates people too much. So it's like, on this one. It's a bigger question. It's about a national Torah, a shared Torah, which Jews who disagree with could unite in together. But I'm deeply indebted to you for mentioning my book. I have no idea who. If you didn't raise your hand before, don't raise it now, because we're just going to go whoever it was, just start talking, because I have no memory. Please go.
How you see the conflict you're describing in Israel as same or different from the conflict in modernity and fundamentalism that you see in a lot of religious groups.
You see, in Israel, precisely what I was arguing for is that in Israel, the problem is not religious fundamentalism. It's not religious fundamentalism going, you say, awry. It's not religious fundamentalism going awry. And you have religious fundamentalists wrestling and trying to force a country to be something. Orthodoxy is not fighting to control and dominate this country and move it away from democracy. The most important thing that you could remember from my lecture, that's not the story of Israel. The story of Israel is secular Israelis giving up on their heritage, not developing a Torah, creating a vacuum in which they invited another Torah to come in. Nobody's forcing and nobody's coercing anything. They're not. I know you want to tell that story. That's not the story. Is that if hundreds of thousands of Israelis were insisting on a third kotel, there'd be a third kotel. But they're not. It's that we've given up the Zionism of becoming. Or we don't have all members of the society fighting to do so. No religious Zionist or ultra-Orthodox Jew came and said, I want your money, which you are going to use for Jewish studies in your schools. I want it in my schools. You can't have Judaism. Nobody asked for it. Nobody did it. They demanded their money, but the other community did not demand theirs. They didn't demand their hours. They didn't demand their place at the table. And part of building this new Torah is about stopping to see the other as the enemy, because when we see the other as the enemy, we're not going to build a new Torah together. It's about recognizing that each one of us has a place. You're not my problem. My first problem is me. It's always easy to say my problem is you. You know, and that's what we always do in therapy. Life would be great if just you would change. You're laughing, you're familiar. That's human nature. If you would just change, our marriage would be golden. But part of being responsible for countries to recognize, 1917 put in motion something different. And it's time for us to get up and to recognize that mistake and to reclaim our Torah and then have a conversation. It could be that a day will come that there will be religious fundamentalists, but that's not the problem in Israel today. The majority of Israelis support the rabbinate. The majority of Israelis support the status of religion in the state of Israel today. You don't have Israelis being coerced by some fanatic religion. It's just not the discourse. It's a comforting discourse because it just requires that they change. It's a different story here. And if we recognize this, then we could begin to implement a healing process, which so far we've avoided engaging in. Yes, please.
Pluralism and tolerance enough for the Torah of Israel, and from an individual perspective, is it enough to be searching, or do you have to have some kind of a frame of reference to which you search?
Now, first of all, pluralism and tolerance are certainly not enough. Certainly not enough, because pluralism and tolerance is how you relate to people who have a different Torah than you, not what your Torah is. While it's a part of your Torah, it's the part of your Torah which asks, how do you live with people who have different notions of what Judaism means? It's only meaningful when you yourself have a Torah of your own. One of the reasons why there's such a lack of tolerance and pluralism in Israel is because you don't have different groups who are putting forth their Torah and saying, okay, I want a place for my Torah here. When you don't have a stake in the game, pluralism is irrelevant to you. So it's not enough. It has to involve values, it has to involve rituals, it has to involve ideas, it has to involve practices. Which ones, that's for us to disagree on. A Judaism without ideas, a Judaism without values and ethics, a Judaism without ritual, a Judaism without practice, these are the cornerstones of every Torah. Now, what they will involve, each one of us has to start thinking. And this Torah, I'm not talking about a Torah for myself in my home. I'm talking about the Torah for the public sphere. What my father spoke about in the 70s, we need a new Torah of Israel, and he hoped that that would be created. But at the end, it wasn't. At the end, we really chose Auschwitz over Sinai in Israel. And we didn't embrace the challenges of Sinai. And now in the Hartman Institute, it's our job to remind people of that challenge. And as we remember 1917, we have an opportunity to see the source of the problem. It's not assimilation. The source of the problem is when Jewish peoplehood and the Judaism of being is not balanced with the Judaism of becoming. And how inherently within Zionism there is the plausibility of that. And when that happens, we aren't all that we ought to be. I have no idea. Yes, please, ma'am.
So I live here, and so my perspective's a little bit different from many of the people that are in the audience. And I guess I'm always feeling challenged by how to approach the other, whichever other that is, whether it's the more religious or the secular. And I'm curious if you're offering programs or ideas to the secular Israeli community. I know you're offering this to this community, but I'm wondering what's going on in your discussions with the people that you feel have not yet
Yes.
found their.
Yes. Number one, thank you very much. It's about as meaningful and important to me as the mention of my book, because but I'm going to refrain a little bit now. I'm going to mention something, but one of the things that we've created during this conference is conversational lunches and dinners, I believe they're called. Were they explained to you? Yes. And look for the one which is called, for example, Be'eri, where the Hartman Institute, together with a group of unbelievable donors from around the world, converged together to create Jewish studies within secular Israeli high schools. A third of all secular high schools today have principals and teachers trained at the Hartman Institute, with curriculum written at the Hartman Institute, with supervisors from the Hartman Institute, crisscrossing the whole country to basically begin to create a Judaism of becoming for secular Israeli Jews. And it's one of our largest programs. And this goes on for a week. That goes on 45 weeks a year. And again, I could continue to tell you other programs, but the answer is absolutely. And we're in the midst of that. We're in the midst of that story. But it took us 70 years to establish this country. And it is possibly going to take us decades to succeed in reestablishing a national Torah for the Jewish people. We're starting. We're in the midst. I think it was you in the. I apologize. Were you all? Did I call upon you too? And then you. Yes, please, ma'am.
This is very exciting. It's a little bit like a Venn diagram, where does Judaism meet? I was educated as a child in a Lubavitcher yeshiva.
She was educated in a Chabad yeshiva.
It started out, the principal was a secular Israeli, and there was a split between the parents as to whether it should be a religious or a secular school. And what they ended up doing was they hired someone who was a little of both. He had smicha as a Lubavitcher rabbi, but he was also getting a PhD in physics at Brown University. And I didn't realize how unique the perspective was at the time until my daughter asked a question that I had asked of this rabbi, which was, how is it possible that what I'm learning in science and what I am learning in Talmud and Torah are both true? And he took me very seriously, and he said to me, it's actually fairly straightforward. It's all about how to calculate time. Time is calculated differently at the time of the Torah than it is now. Now it's 24 hours. Then it was probably 10 million years. And I said, oh, okay, that's great, thank you. My daughter received a different answer, unfortunately. But this gives us an opportunity maybe to find better answers.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, please, sir.
My question is about the central claim that you're offering, which seems to be a case that secularism is somewhat empty of meaning in some way. It needs to be replaced with what you're calling a national Torah or for the public square. And I'm curious whether in that you mean to call for religious reconciliation between Judaism and Judaism, both in Israel and without, and what that means for non-Jewish communities in Israel and how they enter into the conversation of the debate with Rome and
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. And there's nothing farther from what I intend. Whether I was accurate in what I said or not, we'll only know on the video later, is to claim that secularism is an empty vessel. Secularism has a Torah. Secularism, I believe, in secularism as a religious Jewish denomination. At the Hartman Institute, we have a rabbinic school in which I'm ordaining secular Jews as rabbis. I don't see Orthodox, conservative, reform, conservative, reconstruction, renewal, traditional, that's full and not at all. The story I was telling was not that secularism couldn't develop a Torah, but that it chose not to. That the Zionist, you could see within Zionism profound ideological debates, but once we came to the formation of the country, secularism created an atmosphere in which I could give up that conversation about Torah and give it to somebody else. The Torah of Israel is a Torah in which secularism, secular Judaism, religious Judaism, denominational Judaism, all talk. Personally, I am an Orthodox secular Jew. That's what I am in reality. So I have a great affinity to secularism. I don't have a split soul. I have a complicated soul. Some people might use the term confused. But deep down, the Torah of Israel is so far away from determining who is the good Jew. It is precisely in the homeland of the Jewish people that nobody gets to decide that question for somebody else. Nobody. There is nobody who stands up and says, good, good, bad, bad, bad. This is a country of the Jews, and Jews bring their Torah here, and let's do it. No denigration or no disrespect meant for any, quite to the contrary. The fundamental glue of this Torah conversation is welcoming all into the beit midrash with who they are, secular or religious alike. As to non-Jews, part of the Torah of Israel is to ask, how do we deal with 20% non-Jews in our society? We didn't have to think about that Torah when we were in the ghetto, because nobody, frankly, was breaking down the doors to get in. Oh, I can't wait to have the penthouse in ghetto Warsha. It's like, nobody was trying to get in. We didn't know about people wanting to be with us. Well, we came home. And we came home to a land which wasn't empty. We came home to a land where there are other individuals and other people. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have to develop a Torah of how we think about that question. It's even more complicated because it is precisely the Judaism of being which creates even a greater alienation of non-Jews in the state of Israel. Because if Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people, then, and that's all, then how does anybody who's non-Jewish have a space here? It is within the Judaism of becoming, our values and our attitudes towards other peoples and the rights of other peoples, that other people make claims upon us. And that we recognize that there are other peoples here. And so part of that Torah is precisely to do that. And frankly, I don't have the time now, but we haven't developed that Torah either. We haven't developed it. Now, there's many reasons why we haven't, but we have more work to do. I believe who did I turn to? I have no idea, I apologize. It was you, one, and then two, and with that we'll conclude. And I apologize, but we're going to end exactly at 7 o'clock. Yes, please, ma'am.
So I have a question, and you may not want to answer it now.
Thank you.
But, no, seriously, because I like this dichotomy between being and becoming. And I also think of the obligation of the Jews to be a light unto the nation. And I think you could be describing England right now, except it's not the Jews, it's the Muslims. And it's the Muslims who are becoming, and it's the Brits who are being. And it seems to me that there's a possibility that if we could
Very possible. And it is true that misery loves company. And many, many countries are asking themselves, who are we? Am I just a group of being? Or is there a Torah of Britain? And how you build that Torah in the midst of fear is what makes it very, very difficult. Many of us have to engage in these challenges, and whether we could do it best and being a light unto the nations is not a description of who we are. It's a challenge of who we ought to become. Last one, my friend. Yes, please.
So call for a national conversation for this Judaism being, and a national conversation in the frame of Hamiyut, as you're describing, presumably includes not just the Jews who are here, but the Jews who live wherever they are in the world.
Yes.
And you pointed out, I think rightly, that at least for large numbers, especially younger Jews, that in specifically North America, that the Judaism of being is, it's not salient. And so the question is, are you imagining that this national discourse about a Judaism of becoming, based here in Israel, would make the Judaism of being appealing to the diaspora Jews who presumably would be participating in it, but it's about becoming, not about being?
I'm not assuming, I'm hoping. The reality is that we don't know. I firmly believe that a Judaism of becoming alone is not going to make it. And I believe that one of the greatest challenges facing North American Jewry is how to bring back a place for the Judaism of being, or how to strengthen it. Now, I could be wrong in that too, but that's my bias. I am hoping that in Israel, which is not just the homeland for the Jewish people who are running away from anti-Semitism, but a homeland for the Jewish people which embraces the total visions of the Judaisms of becomings of all the Jewish people, will not be a light unto the nations, but will be a light unto the Jews. That a Torah of Israel, which Jews could feel, I want to be a part of that Torah, I want to engage in it, will be something that will reactivate a connection to a people in ways that right now, it could be very, very challenging. Will it work? I don't know. I know, however, that if we don't do it, we're talking about a new reality of Jewish life, which, if we go back to 19th century, didn't work out that well. Will it work out better now? Are we going to create different balances in North America? Very possibly. But I believe if there's 14.5 million Jews in the world, 85%, 6.5 in Israel, 6.5 in North America, if we could find a way to talk to each other, not only will we produce a new Torah of becoming, but we'll also solidify ourselves as one people, as a people united with each other, walking through history, not just in the past, but through a history which is yet untold in the future. There's what to dream about. Thank you all for joining us.